Okay, so this is the fuel inlet side, and we need to add a return line. It really sucks in this car. The top of the tank is completely off limits. There's no space up there at all to put anything. I really would like to run this way, but there's just no room. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So we have to go this way, and we may not even have room this way. It's going to be really close from center to the wheel well is 18.5 inches, and with this in here, it's going to be right at that. So we may have to end up modifying our wheel well, which is actually removable pretty easily, but we may have to modify it even yet. This is where this dash 8 is screwing me. If I had ran a dash 6, which is what I wanted to run for the return line at least, it would have saved me a pretty decent amount of space. You know, probably a ½ inch right there, minus this fitting. So it may be about 3/4 of an inch it would have saved me if I was running dash 6. And dash 6 would have been more than adequate, but I didn't have any line, and I should have just committed and ordered it when I was doing all this. But I didn't, so we're stuck with this. So the farther up you can go, the better. I obviously have a radius there, so I have to go. It has to be flat, or this thing won't seal. So I'm going to have to go just below there. If I put it up there, it actually is shooting the line out, which would be worse. So I'm going to have to go lower. And again, it should be fine. One thing for sure, since you can't actually put a fitting on the inside here, not without soldering it, which I've actually debated, it's going to be shooting fuel across the tank. So if I were to take the cap off while the car was running, potentially fuel would come spraying out of it. Okay, well, I had an idea. So this is that nylon fuel injection line. It fits in this fitting so tight that I pushed it in there about 1/4 inch and I couldn't get it out, so I just started pushing it in. I'm going to try. I put it in the one of the grooves there. It holds it pretty tight. I'm going to try to, oh yeah, it's going in there. That will not come out of there. We came up with a fix. Okay, I'm not even going to try to keep the chips out of the tank because I don't think it's possible to keep them all out. We're just going to plan on cleaning the tank when we're done. It is perfectly clean on the inside now, but it's not going to be as soon as we put this in. So what I'm going to do is put an O-ring on, and I'm going to make sure, since these O-rings are flat, I'm going to make sure that the O-ring is sitting flat wherever I'm going to drill it, so that we're not trying to deform the tank, so we can make sure we get as good a seal as possible. I cleaned the whole tank with a wire brush. It was a brass wire brush, so it wasn't. If you use a steel wire brush on this, it'll probably start to rust because the steel will actually get on in the zinc coating on it. So that's pretty good there. I'd like to run it higher, but it doesn't sit flat up higher. So that's what we're going to have to do, is right there. Now let's look at the fuel sender and make sure for certain that we're not going to have a problem with the fuel gauge, since the gauge is actually on that side. So it's down here. Oh no, that should be fine. It's so low in the tank and so far out. I don't see that as being an issue. So this will be basically right here. So we should be totally fine that way. All right, I'm just going to use the step drill, and I'm just going to go one step at a time until that fitting fits through there. We don't want to go oversized on that. We want as much surface area underneath those washers as possible. And remember, when you're looking for locating your return line, if you're going to do it this way, you need to get to the back side for the nut. So don't forget about that. So I can actually feel this the hose in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of bending it out against this side wall right now by hand and getting the nut as tight as I can, so as I tighten it, it'll swing it in. If it's pointing out this way, That's really good. It would actually be nice if it was hitting the side so it's not going straight into the fuel, aerating the fuel. My wrench doesn't fit. Okay, so there you can see it. So it's against the outside edge pointing down. So it's right out here. It's hitting right in here. So that's good. Okay, so now we have to tackle this guy. This is actually pretty easy on this, what we're doing here. So remember, this is on the uphill side of the car, and I want the pickup actually on the back of the car. So this is the front of the car here, and I want the pickup in the back of the car. So we're gonna, from the factory, it has the pickup, you know, just here up in the front, which obviously worked, but I think we can do better than that. So what we're gonna do is actually extend this so that it ends up in the back of the car, and we're gonna do that. We're going to do that via some more of that 3/8 nylon tubing. It will make it a little more difficult to get this in and out, but it should be okay. About 13 inches. That would put the end of the sock. This is a replacement sock from OER. That'll put the end of the sock right in the back corner. So basically we're going to put it so the curve is pointing it down, so it's actually just pushing extra hard on the ground so that we don't have to worry about, you know, putting it in this way and having the sock up in the middle of the tank, which wouldn't be ideal. We could, if we wanted to, actually clamp on a piece of wire to it that'll hold, that's stronger than this, that will hold it, like a piece of stainless steel welding wire, maybe 1/8 inch, would be pretty good. I would use stainless. I wouldn't stick a mild steel one, even though it has the copper in it. It'll still rust in there, especially if you're going to run E85 or anything. I would really put E85 in a factory tank anyway. If you're going to do E85, you're going to want to do at least put a liner in a factory tank, which you can do. Okay. One side has an insert, one side doesn't. So the insert side goes into, obviously, the nylon, and then the other side will be for the steel line, which won't have an insert. Now we're going to hold this up here and make sure I'm happy with it before I put the sock on it. Try to roughly get that where it goes. I'm going to take about 1.5 inches off of it. So a little too far back. I don't want to wad the, I don't want the sock to be up the other side. Yeah, that's going to be good right there. All right, so now the sock, you just push it on there. I'm going to make it so that the flat side is down. So it's going to be like this. It's really tight on this nylon. And it grabs, it won't pull, it pushes on decently easy, but it doesn't come off. It'd probably be easier just to replace that line. So that's what it's going to look like, and then that'll just all be pressed onto the bottom. This fitting right here will be hitting the bottom. of the tank. Now remember, you cannot use normal fuel line in your tank. That's why I did it this way. Normal fuel line will dissolve. The outside of it is not compatible with the fuel. I know that sounds weird, but it's not. You can buy a rubber line that goes inside of a tank and it's over $20 a foot. This is a much cheaper option. It's actually easier because if I were doing rubber line, I'd have to put another piece of steel in or another piece of hard tubing so that we can get our socket. Okay, I have the sending hole at the very bottom of the tank in the corner there, and then I'm actually going to use this blower and blow around, and we'll shake it around and make sure that we can get everything out of it. Luckily, it's kind of a noisy tank, so it's really easy to tell if you still have chips in it or not. So you install them from these tabs, not these tabs. These are the stops. I always see guys hit those ones. You don't hit those ones. Now, I'm going to shine a light down there. I probably won't be able to film that, but I want to look in there and make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. Okay, the float is not just... Oh, that is perfect. The end of the sock is right at the corner. And then our return line is right here, pointing down. Okay, so now before we install it, there's supposed to be a rubber a pad. I'm not sure if they use rubber or what they use there. We are going to use rubber. This is 1/4 inch thick rubber pad. What we're going to do is just make a saddle because it pushes here and here and here and here on the car when you install it on the inside of the body. So we're gonna put that there. Hopefully it's not too thick. It shouldn't be, and it's pretty soft stuff. So. Okay, so this is what they used to hold the strap up. It's not too much different from the factory bolt, other than it's made of a carriage bolt. But in reality, this is going to work just fine. But we're going to clean it up so it doesn't look like someone just bent a carriage bolt to make a hanger. So what we're going to do is actually cut it back and get the bend back here where it needs to be and cut this head off. Then I'm going to straighten it. I already straightened it a little bit. I'm going to straighten it, run a die all the way up it, and it'll be good. So it'll look just like the factory one after we do that. So there's nothing wrong with doing stuff like this. I know it looks kind of cheesy, but we'll make it so it looks just like factory one. It'll work. Okay, so on the inlet, on the low pressure side, but on the inlet to the fuel pump side, we have to use a hose clamp. So I'm going to show you the hose clamp in a second, but first I cut that line as clean as I could, and now I'm actually going to heat shrink it, overlapping the heat shrink just a little bit on the hose, off the end of the hose, and now I'm using a cigar lighter to shrink it. Obviously don't do this if fuel's been in here. Do I need to say that? Okay, so that makes a nice end on it. So now I'll show you what we're going to do for a hose clamp. Okay, so it's going to be hard for you to see up there, so I'm going to show you. So you may recognize this. And what those are is a PEX. 3/8 PEX works on this really, really well. It's just like an injection clamp. I've actually seen guys selling clamp kits for these, like they're special, and then you get them and they're actually just PEX. It works really, really good on this. Really nice for fixing air hoses because they don't have much of a bump. I like actually the copper rings that crimp on, even better for air hoses. Unserviceable, you have to cut them and get them off. But it should be about the best hose clamp you can get. So here, I'm going to put it on there. You can't. You want the clamp just behind the barb if you can. This is the problem with these, is you have to open them so far. And that will not come off. And that, I would imagine, would hold a ton of pressure. But since it's a PEX and not meant for fuel systems, don't try that at home. Since you couldn't actually see what I was doing there, I wrapped it. That's where the factory line was as well. But the wheel well is here that covers this. And so this is behind it, so it goes to the inside. Okay, we're kind of getting into where this 4-post sucks for this, doing this stuff. You have to like crawl under it, otherwise it's so high you have to stand on a step stool while you're underneath. It's kind of a weird deal. And my camera, I feel super cramped with the camera in here. So the fuel pump is going right here, if you can even see that. And then here's the line that we just ran. So that is going to go to it on there. It's a long ways away from the shop. I'm sure on camera that looks like it's like right up next to it. But there's 2.5 inches from the outside of it to it when it's in there. And that shock will never go any closer to that. Okay, so I'm prepping this fuel pump by putting the fittings in. And one thing you want to watch, if you can see that O-ring, the green O-ring, especially on this one, it seems particularly bad. If it was a really hot day out, it would be quite possible as you're tightening this in there that O-ring maybe would squirt out in one little spot. And then when you tighten it, you probably wouldn't notice because it's kind of hidden. But it could pinch that O-ring off, and if it didn't actually make it into the boss where it goes. It's in there now. On the hotter the day out, the hotter it is out, the more likely that is to squirt out of there. It didn't in our situation, but it is something that you need to watch for. And then there's another kind of funny thing. These performance tool cutters actually cut this line. It's a little hard to get the last little bit. But and I tore it, but it actually cuts it, which is kind of crazy. I don't think it would cut just old-fashioned stainless braided line, that's solid braided, because there's a lot more reinforcement in that one, and you'd probably have a harder time. But with a fresh blade, it actually cuts it. So it's kind of cool. You don't have to do the grinding through the wire like I was doing earlier. Okay, so here we are in the wheel well, looking up. That's the clamp that I put on that you probably couldn't see. We're going to be using the Summit fuel filter. I'm going to be using this one. This is a strainer. I wouldn't consider this to be an actual fuel filter. You can see through it pretty easily. So they say it's like 60 micron or something, but I don't know if I 100% buy it. And then the other thing is they do have a flow direction, I believe. And since it's not actually labeled, it's the side, the inlet side is the deeper of the sides where the mesh is on the inside. So the inlet would be the opposite of that. So the S, the beginning of the writing, I don't know how consistent that actually is. Oil. Alright, let's get that back where it goes. Okay, so this is what I come up with. So I got a 45 on both of them. It is going to mount just like that. We have 3 inches or so of clearance on the back side. That's our pressure line that'll go into it. So then down on the fuel filter side, the fuel filter is going to mount right here. And I actually have to get some clamps for it. I have ones that are too big and ones that are too small. I don't have any that are just right. So they're going to be like this, and then this guy will be kind of like that. So there's going to be a really short line there. These two don't move independently of each other, so it should be okay to have that short bend. I don't think I'm going to run a 45 on this one. It's just going to be a straight, and there'll be a little bend in the hose there. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the pump so that I don't have to hold it anymore. And then we can get going on mounting that fuel filter. All right, and I'm just drilling little pilots with that step drill since it works so good. So I just located one hole, and then I'm actually going to tighten the fuel pump up and use a transfer punch to find the other 3. That way I can make sure that they're dead center, since we don't have, I'm putting 1/4-inch bolts in there, and there's no clearance on those holes, so we have to make sure everything's spot on. I'm drilling and tapping that plate. So that plate, I believe, was a 3/16. It might even be 1/4-inch plate that we used on that to reinforce the frame right there. So it was plenty thick enough, and then I just used a bolt sized appropriately so it's not poking out the other side too far, so that we don't have anything sharp sticking out the other side. It worked out pretty good. And one thing I forgot to mention is on this Holley pump, I'm pretty sure the pump is actually isolated within that bracket. I'm not 100% positive though, so we may end up having to come back and add isolators to that pump. But we'll see. I haven't used this pump before, so we'll see how loud it is once we get it together. And then I'm running all these hoses. Always plan on doing everything about 10 times because nothing works out like you think. So as I'm doing this, you'll see me put stuff together, take it apart, put stuff together, take it apart. I keep changing fittings because nothing works out. That stuff just doesn't bend around like you think it will. And I'll bet the most experienced people doing that probably have the same problem where they have to do the same thing. I'm sure if you do it enough, you probably know everything to watch for. But the line that I just put on there, it doesn't work. I can't get that fuel filter to sit the way I want it, so I end up having to take that off and put a 45 on it. And it is what it is. So that now it's looking like where I want it. So I put a 90 on the pump. And then a 90 on the fuel filter, and that's how I ended up getting it up there. It sure looked like it would have worked with just the 145, but it sure didn't. And it's as simple as that. Just plan on it. That's what really sucks about doing these AN style fittings is they're so expensive. So you just want to only buy what you need, but it's so hard to plan ahead for exactly what you'll need. So it kind of gets to be a nuisance almost. It's amazing how much these fuel systems actually end up costing. This is just our return line, and I need that on there just so we can get a length. So I don't want to go too tight in there. Right about there. Can't believe these actually cut this. Cool trick though. All right, there she is. Doesn't look too bad. That took a lot longer than I was expecting. Okay, so there it is installed. So I am missing, I already have the screw. I drilled the holes already. I temporarily stuck a zip tie thing in there, but I need to tie this to the frame. I don't have it tied yet. There's actually like a recess up in the frame right there, so it's kind of, or up in the body, so that kind of worked out pretty cool. And then the fuel line, the return line, I ran up and over, and then it met up with it on the back side, and that's where it comes out the other side and goes up to the tank. And then you can't even see them, but they're up in between the body and the frame. You gotta cut that zip tie. Let's see if we can see. Oh, here's where they come out, and I actually have it tied. This is where it's still on the body, and then it goes down to the frame. It starts mounting to the frame in there. So, and remember, I put the heater hose on up in here, and this is another spot. I have the screw for it already, but I need to clamp these hoses up there still. So those clamps are on the way too. Otherwise, it is done. Okay, one thing I am going to change is that 180-degree fitting that I ran going down like that because the 90 didn't work because it was made the hose too short. And there's so much flex in the engine to the firewall, we can't have that short of a line. I did find a 120-degree fitting. They're kind of expensive though. But I'm going to get the 120-degree fitting, and that should even out that angle. So basically, it'll end up going about flat with the motor, and I'm going to point it towards the back of the intake there, and then it'll curve around to there. So I'm going to try that and see if that looks better than that. I don't like that 180 fitting on there. It looks a little silly, but it does serve a purpose. So that is that. So obviously now, once we get the fuel in it and we're getting close to firing, we'll set our fuel pressure before we start it. So we'll just jumper the fuel pump so we're not freaking the computer out. Okay, and so for wiring the fuel pump, it's really easy. So the PSI harness, remember when we installed that, we added this pigtail, and this is for our fuel pump. So one is going to go to the positive of the fuel pump, the lead I'm touching there with the bottom, and then the top one just needs to go to a battery plus fused. So we have to do that, run that one on our own. So that's where we're going to plug that in. The ground on the pump will just ground back there. We don't need to run a wire all the way up here for that. And that completes our fuel system. Other than the vented cap, which I just ordered, I found them. They're actually available pretty easily. That's the last part to complete the fuel system. And so coming up in the next couple weeks is I'm going to be doing the wiring. So we're going to upgrade the wiring. I'm going to change some of the things that we already did. Add the tack. We're going to wire in the fuel pump. We're going to put in the ignition switch, that type of thing. And then we're going to be doing all the hydraulic lines in the engine compartment for the hydro boost, for the power steering, for the steering assist cylinder, that type of stuff. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.